morning, everybody. It looks like we have a quorum here, and we can begin our finance meeting for today, March the 8th. My name is Kristen Norton. I am the finance chair, and welcome all of you here that have logged on to join us. I would appreciate it if our committee members would introduce themselves, and then we can get started with our first item of business. Just going along the top here, it looks like Vice Chair Davis, you are the first person I see on my list.
Good morning. Nice to see you.
Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Cindy Davis, District 11, which is much of the northern part of Utah County and the southern part of Salt Lake County.
Great. Thanks, Cindy. It's good to see you. Committee Member Straight.
Yes, I always think of Hunger Games when we have to say our district number, but I'm district number 3, and that's the southern part of Weber County and the northern half of Davis County.
Thank you, Committee Member Straight. Committee Member Bogus.
Good morning. My name is Christina Bogus. I serve Taylorsville, Kearns, West Jordan, and it's District 8.
Wonderful. And Board Chair Moss.
Good morning, Jim Moss. I serve in District 12. That's Orem, Linden, Vineyard, up to Midway, and out to Vernal.
Appreciate that all very much. We have a great committee. And I forgot to say that I serve San Juan, Kane, Washington, Paiute, Wayne, and Garfield counties, which compose District 15. Okay, our first item of business is public comment. And let's see, we maybe don't have public comment, but we maybe do have public comment. Cami, what have you heard back?
I have not heard back from them yet. As soon as I do, though, I will let you know.
Okay, that will be great. Appreciate that very much. There was just a little bit of confusion about which committee that should be in. So we'll move on to item 2.2, which is an update to the LEA annual assurance document. Here to speak with us today on that is Deputy Superintendent Angie Stallings and Master Legal Requirement Contractor Tracy Nuttall.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair Norton, committee members, Angie Stallings, Deputy Superintendent of Policy. It's always a good day when I get to join the Finance Committee. And as Chair Norton mentioned, we are here to give you an update on the LEA annual assurances document. And so I'm just going to introduce it a little bit before turning the time over to Tracy Nuttall. As a reminder, back in 2021, in the spring of 2021, the Standards and Assessment Committee reviewed the annual assurances. This happens every year when we usually update the annual assurances that are required for LEAs to submit to USBE. We do that shortly after the session to add or delete anything that may have been repealed or added. And so this is an annual adventure, so to speak, or opportunity. The annual assurances document, which we'll show in a moment, and I did want to mention, Cami, if it's okay, if Tracy can share her screen, she'll be sharing some slides and the annual assurances document. So I don't know if she needs to be given sharing rights, but if
I opened that up for her, she should.
Perfect. Thank you. The annual assurances is a document that primarily began with there's a federal requirement that in order to receive certain federal funds that LEAs need to give USBE annual assurances. And then we, on behalf of all of the LEAs that receive federal funds in our state, we assure on behalf to the Department of Ed. And so back in 2021, when the Standards and Assessment Committee reviewed the assurances document, they wanted to reduce the number of assurances and or make the assurances document more meaningful. Some of you, and I believe Board Member Straight was on that Standards and Assessment Committee, and I actually wasn't there for the discussion, But part of the discussion that came out of the annual assurances document was a request or an expectation for a list of master legal requirements. And that was then flushed out, came to the Finance Committee in September of 2021, where we talked about what that could look like. And in September 2021, that's when the Finance Committee approved the funding for what has become the Master Legal Requirements Project. And so Tracy Nuttall is here with us. That is who we ended up contracting with. We went through an RFP process, and there was a committee, and there were a number of applicants for that work, and we selected Tracy. And there are 3 portions to that Master Legal Requirements Project. It's creating a Master Legal Requirements list of sorts, which is actually going to be the revamping of the administrative rules on our USBE website. We're getting very close to that being fully, hopefully, completed. We were just talking about it earlier this week. We're hoping that we can showcase the new format and look of the legal requirements embedded through the rules website in August. That's right now our goal, is to be able to come to each committee and show that work. Also, as part of the Master Legal Requirements Project, Tracy worked with me on the oversight framework. And then last was part of the Legal Requirements Project was a request for her to analyze every requirement that's on the list and determine whether they were legally required or not. And so she's going to, I'm to her, because you'll see in the document that it's broken up into 5 different categories of assurances. And we did that in hopes of making it easy for you to determine if if you wanted to delete everything but those that are legally required, or if you wanted to maintain all the assurances, or if you wanted to eliminate certain categories. So Tracy will give you some more background, and if requested, she can give you some examples of the different assurances in the different categories. So I'll go ahead and turn the time over to Tracy Nuttall.
Hello, I'm really excited to be here today. Thanks for that great introduction, Angie. That makes it easy for me to jump right in. That was awesome. Yes, if you don't know me, hopefully you've seen me a couple times in the last couple of years as I've been working on this project, but my background is I used to work for the legislature, drafting public education bills, and that's kind of gone forward from there. So I'm excited to be here. I have looked at a lot of legal requirements in public education over the past couple of years, and I'm here today to tell you all about the research that I've done that has culminated into some options that I can give you for the assurances document. So as Angie kind of mentioned, a lot of my research that I've done culminated in the oversight framework. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about how to use those, to use that in the context of the assurances document. And as Angie said, I've reviewed the assurances document within that context, and I'm just here to give you some options on simplifying the document. And I want to be really clear. I know typically the board or the committee for today looks at the assurances document once a year and decides whether that's going to go out for the fiscal year. So we are doing it a little differently because my contract required that I present these options to you today. But what I want to be clear about is that the committee can make a recommendation today to just go ahead with the assurances document, as it always does, to do that. But the committee can also determine whether you want to recommend to the board any of the changes, the options that I have come up with based on my research. So, but either way is great. To fulfill my contract, all I need to do is present these options to you today to tell you what I found. So I'm excited to jump into that. Let me go to the next slide. So in a more, maybe in a little bit more detail. Sorry, I got to move this. I can't see my own slides. Okay, so yeah, so what I said is the options for today are you can either keep the assurances document as is, or you can simplify the assurances document. And if you just determine to work towards that, what we would do is, first of all, we would keep all the federal assurances and those that are required by law. And I'm talking about assurances required by law. All the requirements are required by law, but some of the assurances are specifically mentioned in statute or in rule. So then those ones would have to stay. And And then if you wanted to simplify the assurances document, then you would approve removal of one or more types of assurances. And that's what I'm going to talk to you about on the next slide. So when I started looking at the assurances document, so I know that the assurances document has kind of a funny reputation. It's kind of like love-hate, right? Like it provides some things for us, some, you know, I like it as an attorney because it does provide some helpful feelings of like, yes, we're making sure some things are done. What it doesn't do for us that I think the board and the committee have discussed in the past, and which is why I'm here today, is that it doesn't have a lot of rhyme or reason to it. It's not comprehensive, I would say. It doesn't have every legal requirement on there. And so it's been hard to know why some assurances are on there and why others aren't on there. And it can sometimes give us a false hope that it's doing more than it does. And I think that that was really the impetus for past board members and past committees, as Angie explained, talking about the assurances document. I think that's really why those other board members wanted to see what the options were. So in my research, I tried to figure out how we could categorize legal requirements, and that culminated in the oversight framework. And so for today, I want to show you a way that you can look at the assurances document where I've categorized the assurances in different categories, which would hopefully make it simpler to know what should we keep, what do you want to stay, and why, you know, so to give a real rhyme or reason to the assurances document, which is just missing a little bit right now. So we know that there's federal assurances in the assurances document, and the overall consensus or feedback that I got from staff was that those federal assurances need to stay. So that's not really something that we'll talk a lot about. I marked them as blue on the document that I'm going to show you, and the document that should be uploaded as the backup. So you'll see those on there. That's not something that is a big item of discussion, whether to keep or change any of those. The next major category is state assurances that will stay if the assurance itself is required by law. So oftentimes, in fact, I think every time, if the assurance is required in statute, like it says something like the LEA will certify to the superintendent that this is happening, then obviously there's nothing to do about that. Those ones should stay, but there's only really a couple of those in the assurances document, and I can show you that in a minute. Okay, so for the last three, those ones correspond roughly to the categories in the oversight framework. So first of all, I'll talk about the yellows. The committee can decide today whether a state assurance based only on a requirement in state statute will stay. So this is roughly a category 1 requirement. It's a requirement that's only in state statute. It's probably directly on the LEAs, and obviously USBE hasn't written any rules on it. There's no staff supporting that requirement. And then the committee could decide today whether it wants to keep those assurances in, or whether, you know, basically as a service to LEAs to give them a heads up that it's in statute and they should be doing it, although that's not comprehensive in the document, or to say, no, we're just going to get those out. That's local control. LEAs should be doing that on their own because that was directly on them, and we don't support that. So that would be a yellow. So an orange, the orange category is analogous to our category 2, which means it's a state assurance, and it's based on, and there's probably some requirements in statute, and there's a rule that has been made by USBE, but there's no dedicated staff to support that, to make sure that requirement is actually happening in practice. So typically that would go, you know, maybe the policy team takes some questions on that requirement, but there's really no one monitoring that to make sure that it's happening. So the committee can look at that today, at some examples of those today, and decide if that's a category that you would want to remove, or if it's a category you feel should stay in the assurances document. And finally, the green would be a requirement it's a state assurance, and it's based on a rule with significant staff support. There's dedicated staff at USBE. There's a significant rule in place, and typically monitoring or some other system that is actually doing, making sure that those requirements are being met. And so the reason for the green on that is obvious. That one, you'd have the greatest level of confidence legally to get rid of those from the assurances document, because you know that USBE staff are already monitoring that system and there's staff dedicated to that. So I can take you into the assurances document right now and give you some examples of those. I just wanted to stop for a minute and ask the committee if this is something that you want to keep learning about, because like I said before, you can decide that that this isn't something you want to get into for this year, or I just wanted to take a couple comments on that. Okay, yes, board member Davis.
Go ahead.
No, I'm not.
Committee member
Sorry.
Oh, Cindy, you're muted.
Thank you. I was just going to say, I think we do need to continue learning about this, because this really this has really been probably a few years in the making. And I know I started meeting with our charter association, one of our charter association directors, a few years ago. And then we combined a task force with charter directors and district directors and looked at reporting requirements. And this is one of the recommendations that we have looked at, not only to reduce reporting requirements, especially for those smaller LEAs, but really, what is the effectiveness? And does an assurance give a false sense of compliance? And if we are monitoring consistently, why do we need to have those things on the assurance document? So I think this is a really important process to undertake. Thanks.
Thank you. Board Chair Moss.
Hey, thank you. Members, just fine. I was going to mostly, completely agree with Cindy. I think one thing about this is the balance. And I think, so this is really helpful, Tracy. I just want to say thanks for digging through this and categorizing in this way. Because sometimes as we're trying to roll back reports on requirements on the task force, we say, well, as long as that's on the assurance, if it's not being monitored or reported elsewhere, then maybe that's the place to make sure they're at least thinking about it and assuring it. And in some of these other categories, maybe we've got enough other means of oversight. We're always looking for them to make sure we've got compliance without an undue burden. So I think as we go through this, there might be differences in those categories. So thank you for teeing it up that way.
Great. Committee member Straight.
Yes, I agree with both assessments, so I won't belabor us, and let's move on.
Okay, wonderful. Vice Chair Davis, did you have another comment?
Nope. Sorry. I'll take my hand down.
Thank you. All right. So it sounds like we should continue on. Let's go.
Wonderful. Thank you. Let me see if I can navigate to my. Oh, I did it. That's a miracle. Okay. Great. I'm going to have to hide this. Okay. Wonderful. Okay. So just to start with a few examples, I think there were about 80 assurances. Is that right? Is that a little high in the assurances document? And I think about maybe a little less than a third of them are state assurances. And so we know that there's a bunch of federal assurances that we're probably not going to look at. So today,
I'm sorry, Chair Norton.
Yes.
I apologize. I see the screen, but I'm wondering which draft in backup this is. Is it draft 1 or draft 2?
this is draft 2. Thank you for the clarification.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, so let's see. I forgot what I was saying. Oh yeah, so really there's probably about 25 assurances that you could look at and see what you thought today. And I'll just go through a few examples. I can go through all of them if you're interested, but I'll go through the first little bit and then I'll take a few more comments on the temperature of the room. So a good example, this first one, Assurance 1, you can see it's marked in red. And we actually, this is a little complicated. Assurance 2 below it was marked in orange. And we actually decided to move that one up into Assurance 1. So I will explain. That's why there's 2 bold headings here, and I'll explain. So on that school emergency response plan, there is an assurance required by statute. And so this is going to be a red. On the emergency drills, that one was an orange because it was mentioned, it is in statute, The requirement for emergency drills, not for an assurance, the requirement for emergency drills is in statute. And there's a teeny tiny little piece of the rule that also belongs to the school emergency response plan. It's the same rule that mentions the emergency drills. So as a result, we thought, you know what, let's get rid of assurance 2 by just combining it. It's super related. And anyway, that was kind of where we went on that. But hopefully that will give you an idea of a red and an orange, and we'll go into a couple more. So, so looking at assurance 3, we can kind of look at 3, 4, and 5. 3 is minimum school days. And so hopefully you can see that. I won't read the assurances out loud, but you could probably see that these are required, the legal requirements. Sorry, it gets a little tricky because there's legal requirements and then there's assurances. Okay. And so I will try to keep that tricky. So the legal requirement of minimum school days is in statute, and it's also in a very significant rule we have that you're probably familiar with, which is 419. You can see that 3, 4, and 5 all have to do with Rule 419. And Rule 419 is a significant rule. And as you can see over here, Aaron Bruff, there's a section, you know, the financial, operations. There's a section that runs 419. There's significant monitoring, significant structure in place on that. And so for that, the option here, that's why it becomes a green, because this is really either a category 3 or 4 in the oversight framework. And because there's monitoring and dedicated staff in place, we would, there's just I think it's a good option for removal from the assurances document. Any questions on that? Does that make sense, what I'm talking about so far, before I move on?
I like the information that you're providing, and it gives us a sense of, you know, our own assurances that if we take it off of this, it is being taken care of internally. Thank you. Board Member Boggess.
Yes, ma'am. Through the chair, what do you mean, Tracy? And I know what I mean, but what do you mean by learner validated enrollment?
Learner validated enrollment.
It's on line 4. I've heard that used in many different contexts, and most often everybody uses it to mean something different. What does that mean in this context?
Honestly, that would be a good question for the dedicated staff. That's not really my area of expertise. Angie, do you have further information on that?
I do, and it is a defined term in R2, and I apologize, Madam Chair, is it okay if I go ahead and respond?
Yes, I was trying to say that, but I was on mute, so I'm glad you just went ahead. Go team.
We're a little less formal today, and I'll try to go back. But and I can put the link, Tracy, into the chat. I don't know if we want to share it today, but I'll put it in the chat just in case anybody wants to look at it. But learner validated program and learner validated enrollment measurement are both defined terms in 419. And if I remember correctly, Board Member Boggess, you wanted to know about the term enrollment measurement, and then I'll just read it really quickly. It means a methodology used to establish a student's membership or enrollment status for purposes of generating membership days. Now that's the defined term, but then if you go down into 419, and again, I wanted to just, let me put it in the chat so you can link to it directly, Board Member Boggess. Under section, and I can't remember if it's 4 or 5. Yes, it is 5. Section 5 of the rule is titled Student Membership Eligibility and Learner Validated Enrollment Measurements. I know that we probably don't want to turn this into a meeting about 419, but just quickly, if you go down into subsection 4, of that section 5, it does talk about an LEA shall use one of the following learner validated enrollment measurements. And then it gives a list of some examples, and an LEA is able to establish those. So for example, a learner validated enrollment measurement could be a project completion. When a student submits a project, that is a way that you're measuring that the student is engaged. It could be a conversation with their teacher via online, if we're thinking in an online setting, or certain group work, or notes from a group that they had worked on this. So it's really meant to be something that's different than just attendance. And hopefully that's helpful. It's really up to the LEA, and it would be the way the LEA measures or demonstrates that a student is engaged in work and progressing.
Awesome. Ma'am, may I follow up?
Yes, please.
So I appreciate that, because I think you answered my question with it can mean many things. And so I'm wondering if it would prove fruitful for some of these maybe nebulous terms that don't really have a singular definition, that we put a footnote in there that says, go look here, these are your options. And that way people reading this document also have that, as well as the public.
And Chair Norton, may I?
Yes, ma'am.
One thing to just note is to the right in column D, we do have the citations to the rules, and that those rules would have, for example, R277 419.4. Anyway, those are the rules right there. It is all in 419. So for example, 419.5, if you look at number 4 all the way across under D, you'll see that it does go to that section that I was just reading from, which is section 5 of 419. So I don't know if that's sufficient, but that it does give the reference right there in column D.
Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, just thank you.
All right, let's return then.
Thanks. Great. So we've done a couple greens. Let's do another orange that might be a little more clear than the next one. So this one is orange. It's assurance 6. It's student enrollment options. And as you can see, there is a statutory citation and also a rule citation here. So we know for purposes of this presentation, that's going to be an orange category. We have a rule about it. So then I would look over to column F, and I would look and see who the contact person is. And you can tell already that we don't have dedicated staff, because this is the contact person here is in the policy section, and they aren't dedicated staff except for actual policy issues. And so here, that's where we would categorize this as an orange, or it would really be, roughly a category 2. In the oversight framework. And so the recommendation here would be that if you are comfortable with LEAs having notice via the rule and statute, then you could go ahead and remove this assurance from the assurances document. And that will be a similar, you'll see that theme with the orange ones over and over again. And then, so hopefully that gives you a sense of what you need to feel comfortable with in order to get rid of a category. I wanted to get to at least one. We'll try to do these 2 yellows. This one is assurance 7, assurance 7 about insurance, employee insurance coverage notification against legal liability. So here you can see that all we have are statutory references. There isn't a rule on this. We don't have any dedicated staff. And so for me, the options on the committee here would be to decide. So this would roughly be a category 1. It's going to be local control. The districts and charter schools are in charge of this on their own. So, one option would be to leave it in the assurances document as a heads up to LEAs and charter schools, because it may be one that gets lost in the shuffle. I think the drawback to leaving it in is sometimes it may give that false sense of security. That all of these are in the assurances document, and that's not true. I'm sure that there are statutory requirements that are not in rule that are not in the assurances document, if that makes sense. So that would be the decision by the committee to think of. If you wanted to try to give charter schools and LEAs a heads up on this, then you would want to leave it in, and if not, you would take it out. Let's see, these 2 are a pretty good example. 8 and 9 are both in Rule 113. And this is another significant rule. And we have Sam Uri here as the contact. And we did contact staff about these. And this was one where Sam was enthusiastic about saying, yes, we have monitoring power here. We're checking on these things. This assurance doesn't need to be in there, in his opinion. That was the feedback that he gave. And so that's why those are green. And so finally, here's another yellow, and then we can pause again. Posting of collective bargaining agreements. Again, you can see it's yellow because it's only in statute. You can see in column D, and then it looks like we don't even have a contact person on that one. So if that makes sense. So I'll pause again to take questions, and we can keep going through the assurances if you want to see more. I can proceed as the chair would like.
Okay, and I'm just looking over the list to see if we have any recommendations from staff on how they are feeling about the greens, yellows, and oranges, one or all. Vice Chair Davis.
Yeah, I'm not sure, Chair. I guess I'm just seeking some procedural information about when and if you are ready for actions. I've pre-studied this list, and I'm assuming our committee members, for the most part, did as well. So, I mean, we could keep going one by one, or we could just rely on our prep for the meeting. But I feel confident right now, moving that we take the green portions out of the assurances document, since those we are doing deep dives in monitoring. So shall I make that motion now, Chair, or?
I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, I move that we remove the green portions from the assurances document.
Okay,
And I'll
and as
speak briefly again to that.
that would be great. We don't need a second, so continue on.
Okay, thank you. I guess in speaking to it, I have more of a question, and Chair, you can help direct where that would go, I guess. But so I think removing this is important to communicate that those are pieces that are, it's not a quick check, yes or no, we're doing it or we don't. I mean, these green pieces have more complexity and more requirement via code for us. So what I'm asking is, if we take them out of the assurances document where I believe they're actually inappropriately placed, where are we housing a comprehensive document for LEAs and the public for transparency purposes that is organized however we organize it, via the levels of oversight or in federal, state, and board rule, however it is that we're organizing, where are we housing a comprehensive look that people can go and say, I see all of these requirements, hundreds and hundreds, and we are adding hundreds and hundreds more every legislative session, it seems. But we need to be able to see them in one place. That's not the purpose of the assurances document. So where do we have it, and where is it, and where is it going to be?
Deputy Superintendent Stallings.
Yes, thank you. I'll start by responding, and then Tracy, please supplement if you have anything you'd like to supplement. As a reminder, when we, when the Finance Committee discussed appropriating money, at the time, Michelle Buse shared some risk of us having a static page that lists all legal requirements, because as soon as you finish that list, it's going to be out of date within 24 hours or within a week or within 2 weeks, because legal requirements are constantly being added, whether it's from the federal government, state, from the state board. We'd essentially have to update that list every time we made new board rules, for example, so at least monthly. And so back in late 2022, I believe it was, Tracy, either October or November, December, Tracy provided an update on the legal requirements project. And I believe you went to all three committees and shared that our approach is going to be a revamp of our administrative rules website in making the website more informational, more searchable, etc. And I know it's difficult because we are so close. We are getting there. We were waiting for our new website to come up to speed. And we now have our new website and our new process. But the administrative rules pages portion, there's the things that we wanted for the administrative rules to make this more of a resource and tool needed additional programming. So we're in the works right now to program to make the pages look, and I hate to take too much time because Tracy and I love this and we could probably talk about it for hours. But one thing we could do is send you a link to the updates that were provided in late 2022. But the short story is, and Tracy, I don't know if you might pull up one of the legislature's bill pages just quickly so that I could visually share with you where we're going for our administrative rule pages. But the idea is our rule pages will no longer be just the rule language. The rule language will be on one side to the left, and on the right-hand side, you will have a list of all the sections of code related to that program and board rule. You'll have references to any like model policies, guidance, manuals, information related to that right now, if you were to go on our website, you'd find the rule, but then you'd have to find oh, thank you. Tracy has a mock-up of the school fees version of what this will look like. So you can see the rule is on one side, and on the other side, you'll see there's contact information for the points of contact. And then once we start categorizing the rules related to the oversight framework, we'll list the category there. You can see the list of statutes and rules. And any related resources. So for example, in school fees, there are a number of documents, guidance, model policies that they provided. The other thing that we are doing is this is part of the programming that we're in the works on right now, is for if you go to the About This Rule, Tracy, I don't know if it's showing there yet, probably not. Oh, it is, great. But for each rule, we're going to click different elements that once we get the programming done, when you're in the administrative rules portion of the website, you could type in training and any rule that requires a training would come up, or any rule that requires you to have a policy would appear. And so the idea is to make the legal requirements more accessible and have our website be a searchable place for whether it's a member of the public, an educator, a principal, a business administrator, superintendent, board member, depending on your role. So it's not going to be a PDF list. That's what I guess I wanted to share with you. We moved away from that because it's not sustainable. And we couldn't necessarily keep up with it as fast as it would change. But we're hoping that this new way of organizing, and again, we've got about 200 rules, that it'll make it easier for LEAs to understand their legal requirements and responsibilities. So Tracy, is there anything you would supplement or add?
Yeah, Angie did a great job of that. Just real quick, there was the concern of keeping a big list updated, but also a really big concern we had about a master legal actual list is the liability. When we start sending people to a place that's not necessarily the law and they're relying on it instead of the law, then it starts to get kind of tricky. And that is one of the reasons we said, well, let's organize the law then as best we can and make it visually accessible to all the spectrum of users in public education, which is really broad, from a student, who goes to public school, a parent, all the way up to, state board members, just a real big spectrum. So we're really trying to make it as accessible as we can. And the way Angie described, if I could just take one moment to say, basically what we're going to have on the landing pages, you can pick a category, and the category would be something like, I'm trying to think now, adult education. So you click on that, and every rule that's related to adult education, it comes up so you can see those. And then like Angie said, like if you want to know, well, which ones require training, I just need that list, because in the past we've had lists, but people can't remember where to find it. Is the list updated? And this way we keep things up to date quickly. We have a system that we're building in place to keep it maintained, and we think it's sustainable, and that it will really provide a lot of access to LEAs and all the public education users. Thanks.
Quick follow-up, Chair.
Please.
I had forgotten that we were revamping the website, but I didn't realize that it was going to have so many kind of components that were searchable, that were going to be just a much better resource for really for educators and for the community. So thank you for all the work on that. I mean, that's going to be great when it gets up and running. I do wonder, and I guess this is just something that LEAs need to keep track of, but there are lots and lots of laws that don't have board rules, that don't require board rules. And in fact, we've been called to administrative rules and been asked not to write board rules when it's not explicitly written in the code to have us include rule that does this, that, or the other. So I guess then there's that whole piece, and I can see it makes a lot of sense why we wouldn't keep a static list of that, because that's probably, you know, state once a year is changing, but federally could be changing anytime. So I guess we just have to help LEAs to be aware that they have responsibilities outside of what's even listed in board rules, but where we've really gotten down to the nitty-gritty in board rule, this will be a really fabulous resource. So thank you for that.
Thank you. And can I just add a follow-up? Deputy Superintendent Stallings, do you see this happening like at enrollment? Just one of the pieces is once we get a rule ready, it's right that quick.
Yes, so every time we update a rule or create a new rule, we will be looking at that landing page and updating it. So like, let's say that Cole ends up getting moved to a different section. He no longer works in school fees, and it's Barbie and Scott Crapo. We would change the staff names there. If there are any new resources, that would be the time as we're working on the updates to 407, that we would ask the staff, what resources do you have? Should we update documents? We'd be checking the code, we'd be checking board rules to see which of those are related. So that will be the website will be updated as those rules are updated. We'll be maintaining that. And I did want to add that Board Member Davis, you bring up a good point, and I think that we will try to think through what kind of resources and how to provide more information related to legal requirements that aren't related to board rules. I think that once we've got the website organized and we can see how it looks, how people are using it, maybe we can identify ways to give access or see if there's lists or something of more specific issues, like a list of training requirements, because we have had those before, where once a year we had a list of training or a list of policies that are required. We might be able to do something like that and put a disclaimer and just state this is only done once a year, and do that. Probably shortly after the legislative session is when we would do that. When we're doing our implementation tracker, we would go through and say what new trainings or policy requirements came out of the session. So that is something that we'll take a look at once we get the rules website kind of up and running, the functionality done.
Thank you. Chair Moss.
Hey, Angie, I think you're probably already thinking this. I was just going to suggest that the awesome master spreadsheet Greg created hopefully has some role in that and might be included as a resource for that, or maybe updated itself with the updates to the other part, because that's a great resource. I know it was built for reports, but it's got a lot of good stuff in there that hopefully is going to serve us well for a while. So hopefully that's part of the ongoing update process. I don't know how, but I know it's an awesome tool.
Yes, that's a good point. We do have that list of reporting requirements that Greg and the Reports and Requirements Task Force have worked on, and that could be something that, again, we update after each session, kind of the way we start updating rules, et cetera.
And for those who haven't seen it, if I could follow up, Chair, sorry.
Yes.
It cascades down from federal law to state law to board rule to reports required to who processes it, how is it used, how does it fit into USIMS. It's just a really awesome device. We haven't fully utilized it yet, but that's another part that hopefully has some connection as they're both updated with the website. And it's a great tool for our visibility on what's out there for LEAs. So thanks, Angie.
Thank you. Board Member Straight.
Yes. This kind of reminds me of the recipe box my mom used to have. The assurance document was just the recipes stuffed in there, and then you had to find one, and now you're going through all of them. I think this just really organizes it and encapsulates it into a better format. It's not that we're getting rid of the recipe, we're just making the recipe more accessible so that when you need it, it's there. And to Chair Moss's point, one of the things that happened as a result of that spreadsheet was we had several LEAs actually respond to that and speak to each one of those. And so anyway, there's lots of information there. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a motion on the table from Vice Chair Davis. And if there are any other comments to that, otherwise, committee members, the motion is that the committee remove the green assurances from the FY25 LEA annual assurances document. If you'll go ahead and please vote. Okay, that passes 4-1 with no vote being from committee member Bogus. All right, now committee members, just with a thumbs up, thumbs down, would you like to continue on with the yellow and orange group? Do you want to hold those for next month? How do you want to proceed? I guess that was maybe too much for a thumbs up or thumbs down, but Vice Chair Davis.
I found this list harder for me personally. Some I was like, oh, we maybe need to keep that on assurances document. Others I thought, yeah, that can probably go off the assurances document. So I could go, if we do move forward on those, I think we should go through one by one. But if other folks in the committee would like another month to kind of think through those orange ones, understanding we're getting a little more down into some subjectivity there, I'm fine to continue that for next month too.
Okay, if I could ask either Contractor Nuttall or Deputy Superintendent Stallings, will you just, because we have jumped into this pretty deep, if you'll just go back and refresh our minds again from, I know we just heard it 40 minutes ago, but the differences between yellow and orange.
Yes, I'm happy to speak to that, if that's okay. A yellow requirement, a yellow assurance would be for a legal requirement that is in statute only, and there is no support from USBE. There's not a rule, and there's no staff dedicated to it. And orange would be a legal requirement, usually originating in statute, but it is supported by a rule. But there is no dedicated staff support at USBE that's kind of checking to make sure things are happening, to ensuring that requirements are met. There's no monitoring, just like a little check-in typically with the policy team if there's a problem.
So we could say that yellow is really local control.
Yes.
Okay. whereas orange, we have some, USBE has some oversight through the rule, but we do not actively monitor.
Correct.
Okay, I don't know if that changes. Yes, go ahead, Chair Moss.
Well, I didn't mean to cut you off. I was just going to suggest, I mean, some of these are local control, but it's not so much necessarily local decisions. It's a legal requirement they have to follow, right? And so I'm a little reluctant on some of these to take it off assurances if that's kind of the only means of oversight we have is just to make sure they sign off on it, but we're not in their business all the time. And under the new 114, we do have, you know, an opportunity if somebody's not following to use that process to see if there needs to be some selected, you know, very targeted oversight. But I guess we're hoping to avoid that just by having folks crank along in compliance. And so for me, maybe it's a little reluctance to pull that back from the assurance if what we're hoping is to have a light hand, but make sure they know this is the law and they got to stick with it. But I'll follow others if they have specific ideas on yellow and orange, but I want to strike that balance between local control and assurance of compliance. Thanks.
Okay. Deputy Superintendent Stallings, would you like to weigh in on our moving forward or the yellow and orange comments?
Yes, I don't necessarily have an opinion or want to say whether you should keep the yellow and orange, but I did want to give you some timing just for your consideration. The annual assurances document is sent out to LEAs usually in May, and it's due back to our office by June 30th. So we do have the opportunity to, if you wanted to hold on this item and bring it back next month, you could review it again in April if you wanted, and then have it go to the board in May. Or the other option would be to have it go to the board in April, but give the full board a whole month, you know, and if it seems like the full board wants more time, and then have it approved in May. But the goal is that we have an approved list by no later than the May board meeting. So I just wanted to give you that timeline background. I guess the last thing that I would share, it sounds like where we're at right now, again, the blue and the red, we are legally required to have assurances in those areas. So those are for sure need to remain in the assurances document. And again, the Standards and Assessment Committee, where they were at in 2021, was they were requesting that the assurances be limited only to those red and blue. But of course, much time has passed. We've learned a lot about oversight over the last couple of years. And it sounds like where we're at right now is to eliminate the green. And if you were to make a final motion today, based on the amendment that was made, you could just approve the annual assurances as amended, which would mean it would be draft 2, but then removing the green. That's where if you wanted to take that motion now, if you're ready for that, or if there are additional options. I just wanted you to kind of know where we're at this point. It would, and that's it.
Okay. Board Member Straight.
I'm just thinking back, and in regards to, for example, the orange, have we had any incidents where we've had to step in regards to any of those of the orange category?
I can give an example because
Please.
as Tracy stated, orange, what it means is often we don't have specific staff who monitor it. And so oftentimes those questions come to people like me, Ben, our AGs, our public information officers. So I'll give you one that comes up quite a bit where parents reach out. And now that we have Cassie Hayes, some of these questions might go to somebody like her, where an LEA, a parent or a student is wanting to engage in open enrollment, for example, or dual enrollment or split enrollment. In fact, I think there's one this week on split enrollment where there's a student who wants to enroll in their local district school and, you know, a charter school or another district school or online school. There's not, our staff are not actively monitoring whether or not how LEAs are managing those requests for different enrollment options. Whether it's open enrollment, that's where a student might apply by February of each year to attend a school in a school district other than their own. But we get questions, and sometimes parents ask us to contact the district or the principal. So that's an example, and it actually was very nice because it happens to be the very first one on this page that we get quite a lot, but we don't have staff monitoring. But we're here as like a support when parents and students, primarily parents or principals of their primary enrolled school might be reaching out and saying, hey, can you help us? We're trying to work with ABC district or ABC charter school, and they're just not aware of the law. And so we want to make sure that we're understanding the law correctly. And then we just kind of confirm you're correct. Or if the other principal has a question or the other district has a question, they can reach out. But it's kind of in that space of when we were talking about the oversight framework, it's more informal. It's more that we're a resource.
Would you say that the term administrative is more in tune with this? Because the parents that call in, they're calling in about a very specific thing, and it's dealt with administratively by staff. No one's looking at this document in the orange area for that issue. They're looking for resolution based on what is already there, and staff is administrative. It doesn't even come to us, nor should it. It's administered. Anyway.
Yes, I would say that I would maybe articulate it a little differently and say that generally these are very local control issues where you have districts and charters that are supporting students as they engage in and select enrollment options. And it's not always as simple when it comes down to the facts, right? Because you might have a student, of course, students have the right to engage in open enrollment and apply to, you know, a different district than their home district. But the districts also have, just like charter schools do, they may only have so many spaces available. And so then questions just come up in that arena, for example, or it might be a split enrollment issue where people think that the student, that the second LEA is required to allow it when actually our board rule says that it's a may, meaning it's discretionary. What the student, once they've chosen their school of primary enrollment, that under some circumstances it's a may that the other LEA supports the second enrollment. But in the case of an extracurricular activity, for example, it's not discretionary if it's that student's boundary school. So it's more of this as applied issue, and sometimes people just need a clarification on the law. And so I wouldn't say that we are dictating it. We're mostly there to say, well, the law says this based on this student. It sounds like this student is entitled to participate in football at their boundary school because their charter school, for example, doesn't have a football team. And I don't know if that's helpful, but yeah.
Does it help to have this in this document, what you were just describing, or does it not matter? Does it matter? Because if it does matter, that's an easy vote for me. If it doesn't matter, that's also becomes an easy vote.
You know, that's a question that's probably best answered by LEAs and yourselves. I don't know if oftentimes it depends. Some people might see this assurance document as busy work, but others might see it as a resource. So that's where it's difficult. And I don't even know that you'd get consensus, honestly, between LEA leaders. That's my guess.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Davis.
Well, I think that I don't know that I would necessarily say that the LEAs we've been working with in the Reports and Requirements Task Force would consider it busy work, but they have questioned the amount of time it does take to go through everything, but how it's used on the back end. Because, for example, just take school fees, for example. The assurances were inconsistent with the monitoring findings. So we'd find certain things in monitoring, but then they would be marked in assurances. And so, I think that the question's more about the efficacy of the document at large, rather than necessarily the busy work, but certainly, especially our small LEAs, would like to spend more time on instructions and things like that than in duplication. And if they're going to spend a lot of time with our monitoring teams, they shouldn't need to spend time doing this as a document. But I don't think that this can be seen as a resource. This can only be seen as a checklist. Are you doing it or are you not doing it on the certain things that are required to have a check mark? The mays aren't required necessarily. It can't be seen as a resource because we have, as was just mentioned, 200 rules already in our rule page that aren't here. So if we're using this as a resource, then again, there is no efficacy here because this isn't how it should be used. We got to narrow this down to what do we need LEAs to say we are doing, check, that we aren't going to spend time necessarily on monitoring so that we have some point of reference when either the legislature asks us or we need to go back or we get a parent complaint and we can look and see what's been reported, and then we go out and do our investigating.
Okay, Chair Moss.
Thanks. I share Member Vice Chair Davis's concern, and what's the efficacy? And I realize that a lot of this was fine-tuned over in law and licensing, I think, or maybe standards and assessment. Taking the example of enrollment, I think that to me seems to have some value as a reminder. And as I've worked with Cassie a bit to kind of start looking at what the parent complaints are, what are people throwing in there about potential non-compliance, it seems to me that we want to dial back the reporting, the excessive constant reporting. We have a targeted enforcement mechanism that hopefully we don't use much. We have the opportunity there if somebody's out of compliance and we're not in a regular enforcement monitoring mode, and somebody says, hey, there's a violation. Now we have a system and we can use the audit. But the hope is not to do that much, right? The hope is to just everybody's cranking along and they're focused on doing their business and educating kids. So I see some value, at least in this one. I don't know how representative it is, but if there are concerns about not getting info on enrollment, it's kind of a reminder. Oh yeah, got to make sure we comply with that. Are we? Yep. Here we go. Check the box. And not a time-consuming report, but kind of just keeping that front of mind in a way so that we don't end up having reports of non-compliance that require us to get in their business. So on this one, I kind of see some value in having it there. I'm curious for those who are in the trenches more, but I guess if we are going to dial back on reports, and if we're hopefully not going to be doing a ton of investigation just when it's necessary, I see this as maybe the least intrusive way of reminding folks that there are things that they're not hearing about us much, but need to be complied with. But I'm not sure, I guess maybe just a quick question. I'm not sure what the process was for selecting those in yellow, which are code without rule, or orange, which are rule without enforcement. Those are all shalls as I understand it, but I'm not sure how we ended up with this selection. I know it was a very thoroughly thought through process, and maybe I could just ask about kind of a Chesterton's fence question. Don't take down a fence until you understand why it was built. And I wasn't sure how these were picked, but they seem to have some value. Does anybody know that?
Angie, if you'd like to address that, please.
I will do my best. What I understand is the history of this. And Darren, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong based on what you heard maybe in the Standards and Assessment Committee back in 2021. But that it wasn't that long ago. It was either in the late 2000s or early 2010s. So before I came to the office in 2015, where actually there was a request from the field to add more items to the assurances document and combine them in lieu of having staff send out like reminders of certain legal requirements that were either new or that they were told, hey, we may want to remind people of this, even though we don't have an active monitoring program. And so somebody else asked me, why is it if we've got, I'm sure, well over 300, if not like 500, quote unquote, legal requirements in code and rule, why do we only have 84 or 85 assurances? I think it's because it was subjectively, staff would say, ooh, there's this new legal requirement, but we don't have a monitoring program or we're not doing training on it. So let's include it in the assurances document, right? So I think an example of that was back in the day, there was the reminder on the pledge. You know, I think everybody now knows that that is a requirement. But when it was somewhat new, it was like, well, we're not going to be monitoring. We're not going to go to classrooms and see if they're doing that, but we want to put that in the assurances document. And so I really think it was well-intentioned. Staff saying, ooh, this is new, or this is something that we have noticed people aren't doing, so let's put it in there. That's how I understand some have made it into the document and some have not. To your other question, however, Chair Moss, which is what is more effective support to compliance, may not be just adding it in an assurance document. And we saw that with the school fees example, which Board Member Davis articulated very well earlier on, that even though we had not only an assurance, but we had 1,100 people throughout the state signing a long certificate of compliance every year since 1996. And those certificates of compliance weren't necessarily translating into true compliance, right? So I was just talking to another staff member, I won't name that staff member, yesterday about the assurances document, and they were kind of making a similar comment that you had, Chair Moss, which is a lot of parents have concerns in different areas. And sometimes we understand it might be that the LEAs just aren't aware of those requirements. So one way of potentially getting to that quote unquote better compliance might be to provide more resources in terms of training or support. So if we have, and just even as I've been talking about these enrollment options, and I'm not a quote unquote implementer, so I'm not usually one who would be going out to do trainings. But if we were to say, we get a lot of questions on open enrollment, split enrollment, dual enrollment, maybe a way to help support LEAs and understanding their requirements would be for us, whether that's me or Cassie Hayes, because oftentimes these are parents who are reaching out to us because they're having a hard time supporting their student in these different enrollment options. Cassie could create like a little training, and then she could meet with superintendents, charter directors, and the principals associations and say, hey, did you realize these are the different types of enrollment options? Students have rights in these areas, and in these areas, your accommodations or support of those choice options are discretionary. That would probably be a more effective way of supporting LEAs to compliance than having this little assurance. Because, and I apologize, I'm probably overstepping here, but I do think the conversation is good, Chair Moss, about if we as a USBE, whether it's board members or staff, are aware of parent and concerns in a certain area, perhaps support LEAs to compliance is to provide more information and training and to go out and say, these are the things we've been receiving complaints on or requests for support here. So we wanted to make you aware of those so that you can support your families before those issues come to us.
Yeah, a quick follow-up, Chair.
Yes.
And I think that sounds really helpful, and that is probably something Cassie and could work with. I think that would be kind of an ongoing process so that we're kind of like what you've talked about with the, fluid website, where you're responding to those concerns that are coming in most often and saying, okay, here's an enhanced need we're seeing. And I do see, and I just want to respect the work of the folks who put this together. I see some value in just a yearly reminder, though, saying, short of needing full support, just, hey, remember, this is a legal requirement. And it gives that tickler to say, oh yeah, are we doing this? So there's a lot of steps in there, right? I think one is just a reminder on the assurance, which itself I think has been pared down. That was a big lift. The second might be, support like you're talking about with maybe Cassie. Then you might have some monitoring enforcement. And in a case where it goes off the rails, you might have the investigation and corrective action under 114. But I mean, I guess my feeling is we're trying to avoid those more intrusive and more costly interventions. What's calculated to just help them remember, oh yeah, that's a state law. I see some value in some of these just in the areas that we're not taking a lot of action. Some of them might be worthy of pulling out. That enrollment one that we were talking about seems to me like something that's probably a good thing to leave in there if it keeps, a reminder in areas where there have been questions, and we don't have to necessarily spend time supporting or enforcing unless it rises to that other level where, oops, looks like we got a serious problem here. But half of it's just kind of the fence at the top of the going back to the fence analogy. This to me seems like a fence at the top of the hill. So thanks.
Okay, I can say we have Compliance Officer Sarah Harward on, and I would like her to weigh in before we continue on. Ooh, Sarah, we can't hear you, but I don't see that you're on mute. Now, okay, let's try it again. Still don't hear. Sarah, I'm going to come back to you. Let's take a question from Vice Chair Davis.
Thank you. I'm gaining so much understanding from this conversation. I really appreciate, and I feel like I've already been studying this for a long time. So this just shows how much you don't know till you know, and how much we have yet to learn. We've spent an hour and 15 minutes on this. It's an important issue, but to Chair Moss's point and to some of the others have made, I personally am having this epiphany of understanding that this assurances document needs to be a living and breathing document. It is a tool that we use for the things that we want assurance from LEAs that they're doing, especially in the case that we don't have active monitoring teams going out and working on it, or we are getting trends of parent concerns. So I could see something like, let's take enrollment, for example. If we've been getting parent questions and concerns, we keep this on the assurance document for a couple of years, 3 years, while Cassie or someone does this training and says, here's what we're seeing with our parent trends. And once those are diminished, those concerns are diminished, that can come off of this document when we've got a good handle on what's going on and it's happening the way it should be happening. And in the meantime, others may need to be put on. That this is something that's new from the legislature and that we haven't been given any FTE for monitoring, but you got to do this. So this is put on the assurance document and we kind of watch it for a time, and it may need to come off after a time when we have seen this is going really well and we haven't had any concerns in this space, and others need to be put on. That way, this doesn't compile into what seems like it was before standards and assessment went through the whole thing, and it turns into just a monstrosity. But at the same time, the efficacy is there because it's small enough for LEAs to pay close attention to and understand what their responsibilities are in this area. So having said that, I think that we should move on to our next agenda item personally. I think that we should take this, make the motion to take the document to the full board with the green removed. I think we should currently keep orange and yellow and all the other things in place. We have to keep blue, obviously, and there's a ton of those. That's a federal issue. No bitterness
red.
there. And then I think as we continue with the oversight model and look at categories 1s and 2s and 3s and 4s, we may make adjustments and bring this back at some point on the agenda. But I think we need to take what we've done so far, take the green to the board, slow down on the orange and yellow, wait till we get more information on oversight, and then perhaps also move forward with the understanding that staff is going to be looking and perhaps adding things to this as we get trends of parental concerns that come in. And some may be ready to come off, and then we can reevaluate those later. Those are my thoughts, and I'll make whatever kind of motion needs to be made to make that happen. Is that the one that was already listed a few minutes ago, Chair Norton? And then we can
Just a
discuss.
second, let's get, I don't want to cut board member Straight out of this. He's had his hand up for a while, and I know he just took it down, but I wanted to hear his comment before we go on.
Okay.
I'm good with that. I think that's a good starting point. I really do.
Okay. And Deputy Superintendent Stallings,
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to share what Sarah was planning to share.
thank you. Yes.
She let me know or wanted to bring to your attention that if you look in these orange and yellow areas, you can see that in this column, I want to say it's E, that there is a requirement for the LEA to link their policies in there. So that is another, I guess, benefit or good thing if you want. I'm not sure what the right word would be, but to keeping a yellow or an orange is it does require them to link to their policies related to those items. So that was it. She wanted to bring that to your attention.
Great, that's important, yes. Okay, so let me just kind of go through with the agenda. Item 2.2 was to update this, which we did by removing the green. Then 2.3 is now is also an action item for our 277-101, the annual assurance of compliance by local school boards. And as Vice Chair Davis just brought forward, we could then take this red, blue, orange, and yellow document to the full board. And if at that point, and I think we need to continue looking at individual yellow and oranges, like Vice Chair Davis said, there might be some individual yellows or orange that we think, oh, that probably could come off, and we could talk to our other board members about. Please go through that closely so that when we go into April, everybody is aware of this and that we can get it taken care of in April. I feel like it's really important that this is ready to go in May, and I hate to leave it to May to get it, possibly get it out late. I feel like if we could make the motion now and vote on it here in committee and then send it on to full board for April, I think that would be responsible of us to do it that way. So with that, I think Vice Chair Davis put the motion on the board.
I didn't yet, but I can.
Okay, would you please? There's one there if you would like, but
Yes,
if you would like to
I
word it-
will, but I'll add a potential staff direction based on what you just said, Chair Norton.
Great.
I move that the committee recommends the board approve FY25 LEA annual assurances document draft 2 as amended. I don't know that we need to add this because it's just a question for staff, but I personally, and if I need to do this in Discovery offline, that's fine. I actually probably will, but I am curious as to the recommendations of, is there something on it right now that could come off that we haven't heard any concerns about at all. And conversely, are we hearing from parents or LEAs or folks in the community that maybe are there a couple of things that need to be put on in lieu of those, or just added and not take anything off? I really am curious about some of the feedback there that they've heard, and that might require going to audit as well and asking our independent audit department. But that's, I know we don't need to make motions for that. That's just where my thinking is based on what you just said, Chair Norton, and the fact that this should be a living, breathing document.
Okay,
Cool.
Cammie's typed it up with a request of staff. How about that?
Great.
Okay, so the recommended action that is before the board at this time is that the committee recommends the board approve FY25 LEA annual assurances document draft 2 as amended, and request staff review the assurances document to determine whether there are items in the yellow orange categories that could be removed and or added.
And
Go ahead.
just a point of clarification, I think that really is specific to two things. Three things really: public input, levels of risk, and new legislation that we just need to put an extra emphasis on, even if we weren't given FTE to monitor. So with an eye to those things, that would be my suggestion.
Okay, so I'm going to update and reread that. I move that the committee, the recommended action that has been moved is that the committee recommends the board approve FY25 LEA annual assurance document draft 2 as amended, and request staff to review the assurances document to determine, whether there are items in the yellow orange categories that could be removed and or added based on public input, levels of risk, and new legislation passed during the 2024 session.
Thank you.
Okay, any comments or questions from the committee? Go ahead, Chair Moss.
I'll just say, I think that is the perfect approach. So I like it. I think Cassie can help, audit can help. And I think the idea that we continually adjust with feedback, I think we have another avenue for that feedback now with Cassie and her job, and we can make this really responsive. So I fully support the motion. Thanks.
Great. All right, then committee members, go ahead and please vote. Okay, that passes 4-1 with committee member Vargas voting in opposition. All right, we will now move on to item 2.4. This is also an action item. This is the board discretionary funds repurpose and some new requests. We have here Deputy Superintendent Jones and Deputy Assistant Superintendent of Operations, Deborah Jacobson, to go over these updates, changes to some funding.
Madam Chair, I apologize.
Yes.
We do need a motion, even though it's just to approve the rule with the incorporated document, whatever the document is. But we do need a motion to move the rule forward as well. And just as a reminder, the rule will, and when I talk about 108, it will just, what will be updated is that the document, whatever the document is that's finally approved by the board, will be incorporated by reference. So we do need a motion on the rule as well, if you don't mind.
So moved.
Okay. I thought we did that as the first one, but that's okay. We can do this again.
Yeah, that was just the document. We didn't take action on the actual rule.
Okay. So the recommended action is that the committee approves R277108 draft 1 on as amended on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading.
And just a clarification, the rule actually hasn't been amended because it will just incorporate whatever document at the end, but because the
Okay,
document
okay.
hasn't been incorporated. Yeah, I apologize. I know it's,
I just wanted to make sure that it goes without the green.
yes.
Okay, it will do that. All right, so let me change that. The committee approves R277-108 draft 1 on first reading and forwards to the board for approval on second and final reading. Committee members, please vote. All right, that looks like that passes unanimously.
I'm not seeing Member Bogus's vote. Did I
Oh,
miss?
I was indeed, I thought it was, and then I looked, it was just Chair Moss's, so I don't see her vote either. Okay, so it looks like Board Member Bogus, are you here?
I'll text her.
Okay,
I'm sorry, Chair Norton, I just stepped out of the room for a second.
okay, we just the initial we just took a vote, or we're in the process of taking a vote that we forward the R277-108, the annual assurance of compliance to the full board for approval. And
Okay.
there-
Yeah.
And there we will go ahead and hash through what's on and what's not on. All right, so that vote is 4-1 with committee member Bogus voting no. Okay, are we clear, Angie?
Okay, sorry. Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay, so then on we go to 2.4, an action item, which is the board discretionary fund repurpose and new requests. Deputy Superintendent Jones and Assistant Superintendent Jacobson. The time is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to draw the attention of the committee members to the backup document, which is the discretionary funds report. We provide an update to the board every month on the discretionary funds report so that you can see. I thought that we did put that in there. Let's see. Yeah, one more down. No, we didn't put one in there. Okay, well, so we do provide the discretionary funds report to the full board. Let's see. If you just pull the memo up, that's great. So in the memo, we put what the repurposing is. So I'll start there. So just as background, in your October 5th, 2023 board meeting, the board approved using $75,000 of its discretionary funds to upgrade obsolete parking equipment to the USB office. The transition to the new equipment fit with the existing framework, avoiding adjustments, etc. And that resulted in a savings of approximately $23,000. So we would like to repurpose that $23,000 towards a purchase of furniture and items for a new part of our building in the basement. Cami can explain a little bit more about that. So that's the first step. So if you'll go down, and I won't read the full background on the DFCM piece to it for the $23,000. We're also, if committee members will recall, there was a time when we were looking at potentially helping John Hancock Charter School with a very unprecedented or significant increase in enrollment for students. They didn't actually end up, or we didn't actually end up having to utilize the set aside that the board approved. So we're also seeking a repurposing of that amount, which is $2,140,000, and to utilize $360,000 of tax delay funding to fund the San Juan School District broadband infrastructure. If committee members will also recall, the board had identified as a request for funding, as part of your board supported request to fund 2.5 million using one-time money for San Juan. So that did not get funded by the legislature. So we're trying to propose a solution for that, which was the board's intent to fund the San Juan School District broadband infrastructure. Then we have the ping board. It's $20,000 from state funds for FY 2024. And we'd like, or we're requesting that the Finance Committee recommend to the board that after this initial $20,000 that the board approve $25,000 of ongoing funds from the board's budget for FY 2025 and forward. So just to be clear, the $20,000 to get us through the rest of this year for fiscal year 24, and then the $25,000 ongoing for FY 2025. So I'll pause there and see if Cammie or Chair, if you'll recognize Cammie and or Deborah to provide any additional information on the particulars of the request for discretionary funds. Can you still hear me?
I don't have anything to add, Scott.
Okay.
Sorry, I was on mute.
Oh,
Yes.
no, I'm sorry. Okay. Yep.
So Cammie said she doesn't have anything extra to add. And Deborah, do you have anything you'd like to add?
I do not.
Okay. Do we have any questions, comments? Vice Chair Davis.
Yeah, I asked a bunch of questions about these offline, so I think I'm ready to go prior to the meeting, except just a reminder really quickly, the San Juan is one time. Will those needs be ongoing, and how are they going to be paid for in the future?
So my understanding is that funding would allow or enable would meet the requirements in a one-time manner, right? This is non-lapsing money, so I'm not saying that the 2.5 million would be spent all at once or in a year, but that yes, it would. That's what's necessary or needed to get them to what right is with the broadband infrastructure. I believe if Chief of Staff Young is here, she has a little bit more background probably than I do on this. Is she available?
She is.
Okay.
Got her
So
hand raised.
you might want to expand on it, yeah.
Go ahead, Sarah.
Thank you. So this is funding basically provides them a 5-year bridge to what we would like to see as a more sustainable and long-term solution from the private industry. So right now, the only entity that is providing internet to the majority of these homes in the river region is the school district. We're really working hard with Emory Telco and UEN and some of the other local partners like Centricom to develop a more privatized solution, which is what you'd see anywhere else in the state. So this gives them 5 years to be able to work with those private partners for them to install the infrastructure necessary to then be the provider in the area.
And I just want to add in that this is going, after 5 years, which is about how long this system has been in place, we need some updates. We need some technical work done. We need some people to go climb up the poles and make the adjustments. And so this is a Band-Aid. Yes, Board Member Bogus.
Yes, ma'am. I'm not certain to whom I should direct this question, but through you, I like Pingboard, and I've used it actually extensively in my work on the board. But if I think about a 6-figure investment over 4 years, that seems to me like maybe not a prudent use of taxpayer money. And so I'm wondering if someone can articulate for me why it costs so much. Is it a human resource investment? Is that what the technology costs?
Madam Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
So just to clarify, the amount requested specifically for Pingboard is in the tens of thousands. It's $20,000 of state funds from the discretionary account to, for the remainder of FY 2024, and then 25,000 ongoing from the board's budget to sustain Pingboard. Does that help clarify Board Member Bogus's request. So it's only tens of thousands, not six figures.
Yes, ma'am. May I follow up?
Yes.
Yes, sir. I appreciate the clarification. I guess I was thinking in the terms of my 4 years on the board.
Right. Oh, I see. Okay.
And so, but I do appreciate that you clarified that. I'm wondering what that money goes to. Is it just to use the technology?
Madam Chair, I think it would benefit Board Member Bogus if Director Call were to answer that question. He's been running the application.
Bring him on.
You bet. Thank you. And thank you for the question. The cost itself, well, first of all, sorry, I'm Todd Call, Director of Strategic Initiatives here at the State Board of Education. And there are a couple elements of Ping Board. The first element is the external piece. And so when you go to our website, that's fully functioning and has been for the last year. So any user can navigate to our USB website, go to our team, look at the organizational chart and navigate through that. And that's the external piece. It allows an external user to be able to search by name or by title or by team to be able to find the right person to connect to about whatever the topic is. The second piece that we've been using on a limited basis, which is what Board Member Bogus appears to have been using herself, is the internal piece. And only a handful of individuals, a percentage of our staff, have been able to access that and use that with our current rollout of the solution. That allows a user who has access and can authenticate, which this proposal would open that up to all users or all staff members at USB, as well as to board members, allows them to log into the dashboard and to access a far more robust tool where individuals can see not only by title and name and by section who is who in the agency, but they gain access to a mobile application that they can use on the go. It allows them to see more specific roles and responsibilities of staff members throughout the agency. Our IT and cybersecurity have taught us that it's not best practice to publish all of those details on our public website, but to make those internal. And so an internal authenticated staff, if this goes forward, all staff would be able to log in and to see the roles and responsibilities of each staff member, how they align with others throughout the agency, to be able to connect with them, how that aligns to the board's mission and vision, allows them to play a game that some of you may have played called Who's Who, where individuals can see pictures of staff and board members and go through a fun way of engaging to make sure that they know who is in our agency. It allows them to praise colleagues. It allows them to leave feedback. It allows them to do much more than what the external piece does. So this request specifically is opening up that internal dashboard or would open up that internal dashboard to all staff to be able to access the more robust version of the tool, not just the tool that's currently on the website.
Chair, may I?
Yes.
So Director Call, is this something that is priced per every 100 employees? Or I guess maybe my question is, if a school district were to do this and they had 5,000 employees, would it cost them far more in the fiscal cycle to do that? Or I guess I'm wondering how do we get to this price point? I'm struggling with the price point. And so if I can understand that, I think I can give you a thumbs up. I think it's done great work for me as a board member, for my constituents. I send people here. I think it's a good resource. I just am struggling with the cost of it. Can you help me understand that?
You bet, Chair, if I may.
Yes, sir.
So the way that Ping Board structures their cost is there is a minimum threshold that gives access to a certain number of users. So at minimum, you're paying a base number. And I believe it's 50 users and it costs some thousands of dollars. I'm not sure the exact number, but then it's a per user amount on top of that. So we've asked them what it would cost for all of our staff and board members, which is right about 450 users to have access to the tool. So there's a base minimum. We have to do that to have access to anything. And then we tell them how many additional licenses we would need in our agency to have everyone have access. And then that's per staff member, which gets us close to the 20 to 25,000. And they are looking at some price discounts and ways that they can support us to make sure we have the best cost.
Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate that. And thank you, Director Call. I appreciate you as well.
Thank you. Vice Chair Davis.
Oh, that was my same question. I'll take my hand down.
Okay. I have another request in this area to bring forward. Cami, do you have that motion to add?
Yes, let me add it to the document quick.
While she's doing that, I can just, another important item that the legislature did not fund was our request for early literacy coaches. And with help, I mean, with, you know, the magicians at finance, we were able to possibly come up with a way to help a little bit in this area. Right down there. Okay. So this says, and the board approved the allocation of $300,000 of the remaining tax delay fund balance for use by the regional education service agencies for continuation of literacy coaches for fiscal year 2025. The regional education service agency boards are meeting, and they've met on Tuesday, March 19th, and will provide the board details on the intended use of these funds for decision-making purposes during the April 2024 Utah State Board of Education meeting. So my hope is that the committee could approve it, and then based on the details that we received from the RISA group, we would be able to have it available for the full board on our April meeting. Go ahead, Chair Moss.
I'll just briefly speak in support. We've advocated pretty strenuously for RISA funding, and it's been one of those tricky, subjects. There's a lot of support for them. I think you probably saw that those that were at PEA. They just lost out in a tough funding year. So I think this is a good way to work around that limited budget they had on the Hill this year.
Yes, and it's a situation where we get great bang for our buck, because we're not even appropriating one literacy coach per LEA. They're sharing them, and they have seen great success in the last 2 years. So we're hoping to continue that. Vice Chair Davis.
I support this too, but I just want to say our conversation last year was that we were only going to do this one time. So I just, because we were hoping that the legislature could provide some of these funds. So I'm going to circle back again to what's going to happen on the March 19th meeting. Are they going to say, and this is, now that we know the legislature is like a no-go on this, if they're a no-go next year, I think we need to know what their plan is to fund, so that we don't get in a situation where we're trying to fund ongoing employees. That can get into a slippery slope. I'm okay with these one-time situations.
And let's bring in Superintendent Dixon. Ma'am, you're muted.
I'm happy to defer to board members first. I've been working with the directors behind the scenes on this issue since it was a board priority to try and get these funded at the legislature, and it didn't go through. So I can give some intel, but I'm happy to defer to board members first.
Okay. Board Member Boggess?
Yes, ma'am. I am happy to move this. I would like to vote on these individually. I think we've got some things that are outside the proper role of government. We're funding employees that we don't supervise. There's lots of this, and I won't take the committee's time because I've articulated those concerns previously. But I would be happy to move this as long as we vote on them in separate line items.
Okay, Chair Moss.
And I should have been clear too. I think this is a helpful transition. What the feedback I got from PEA, especially the chairs last year and again this year, is that they are hoping the RESAs, having proven their value, get that funding from the districts and charters going forward. And I think perhaps that's what they're looking at. I've spoken to the RESA chairs, but I think, you know, if the legislature having not chosen, I support us, you know, helping them move forward with that great work. But I do think, you know, they probably aren't looking at more legislative funding from what I could gather, even with all the enthusiasm. So I like the idea of helping them, but I do hope they're exploring how they can have their charters and districts support that work and get those economies of scale that provides the benefit.
So member Chair Norton, I'm happy to weigh in now. I think that's a perfect segue.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair Moss, for that segue. And I think Chair Moss explained it well in working with the directors. I'm sure we have a couple listening online. And the plan is to come up with long-term plans for funding and to work directly with their board made up of the district superintendents and to try and find long-term plans. We know, as was explained earlier, that having a coach at a RESA really supports our rural districts. They can't manage both in funding and just time having one per district. They don't have the personnel, and that's the benefit of the RESAs, right? That's why we have them to support our rural educators and rural needs by using economy of scale. So this is this probably isn't even needed for all four, but perhaps 2 or 3 of the 4. So it is a transition year for sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Board Member Bogus, would you like to make your motion to split these?
Well, I don't think there's a motion on the floor, ma'am. So I guess I would move the initial one that we recommend the board approve repurposing the remaining discretionary funds from the parking garage update to the furnishings for the break room and the basement hotel office remodel. And then if we could vote on that, I'll move the rest of them in isolation.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else want to comment on that? Chair Moss, did you want to make an additional comment?
I'm sorry, I'll drop my.
Okay, no, that's all right.
Oh, yeah, and I'll keep my hand up. I'm happy to make these motions, Chair.
Okay.
It just, I guess this is like a thing where it just stays up in this version.
Okay, let's just, then if there's no other additional comments on this particular item, let's go ahead and please vote. And I've got to get everybody's pictures out here because I can only see a couple of your votes. Okay.
Ma'am, I'm so sorry. I don't think this device actually has my picture loaded into Zoom. I will fix that before our next meeting.
No, that's okay. I can see you. I can see Vice Chair Moss, but that's about it right now.
I show yes for everyone except your vote.
Okay, I'm a yes.
Perfect.
All right, so Board Member Bogus.
Yes, ma'am, I would move that we recommend that the board approve repurposing funding set aside for John Hancock Charter School in the amount of $2 million and change and utilize $360,000 of tax delay funding for the San Juan School District broadband infrastructure. And then if I may speak to the motion.
Go ahead.
So I understand that I made this motion, but I would speak against this motion. We've done our due diligence. We've created an intermediary process. We've advocated for these at the appropriate level. We've funded these on a one-time basis. It's just not the proper role of our agency to fund private enterprise. It's not the proper role of our agency to fund local LEA employees. And I would just speak against this motion. I think we've done our due diligence. We've advocated at the legislature. And I just don't think it's the proper role of the USBE. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Any other comments?
I'll just say to a large extent, I agree, but I'm willing to do this as a bridge into them finding a way for the districts to fund.
Okay, I also believe strongly that anything we can do to help these smaller districts with their literacy and their other educational needs, they are stretched extremely thinly, and they are being hit very hard with this particular year. I know that they do have plans going forward, and but felt that this year was not going to be a year that they were going to have problems getting it through legislature. So I think that I feel very good about extending a hand. Go ahead, Board Member Straight.
Yes, I understand the point, and I do appreciate the point. It does need to be, it does need to have a more permanent solution. We need to make certain that we're getting feedback on the effectiveness. There was presentations that were made in the last year that showed the effectiveness in some of the REISs. We want to see that in all of them. But really, when it comes down to it, we got to do this for these students in these rural districts. It benefits them greatly, and that's what it's really all about in my mind.
Thank you. All right, Board Member Vargas, did you want to? You got to vote up. Okay. All right.
I'm sorry. I wish it would take that down.
I know I have the same situation. Okay, so the motion before the board is that the Finance Committee recommends that the board approve repurposing funding set aside for John Hancock Charter in the amount of $2,140,000 and use $360,000 of tax delay funding for the San Juan. Nope, that is not the one I'm looking for.
Ma'am, I think it is the one you're looking for.
Yeah, Madam Chair.
Okay, so
Yeah.
sorry.
Oh, you're good.
I commented on the wrong thing.
Utilizing $360,000 of tax delay funding for the San Juan School District broadband infrastructure.
Yes, that's the motion I made, ma'am. I
Okay,
think when I spoke to the motion, I spoke to two motions, and I apologize.
all right, that looks like that passes unanimously.
Oh, no, ma'am, I voted against it.
Well, I am batting 1,000 today. All right, that passes 4-1 with Member Vargas voting against it.
That's fine, ma'am. I would
Yeah.
move, with your permission, that the Finance Committee recommend that the board approve utilizing $20,000 from fiscal year 2024 of state discretionary funds and $25,000 of ongoing funds to sustain the ping board subscription for fiscal year 2025 and beyond. And then with your permission, ma'am,
Go ahead.
I would just offer that if the public is listening, that this is a lot of money. And I'm not going to deny that. I have some consternation over this expenditure, but I do think in terms of transparency, in terms of interagency use, I have used this. I forward it to my constituents to use. If you do not know, if you are a member of the public and you do not know how to use Pingboard on the USBE website, I would encourage you to reach out to any of us. I think if I could, I think this is a good investment for our agency. I think it's a good move toward transparency. I think a lot of things, like I said, I do have some consternation, but I can support moving this to the full board for further debate and final approval.
Thank you. Hey, board members, please go ahead and vote. Okay, that passes unanimously.
And then finally, ma'am, I move that the Finance Committee recommend that the board approve allocating $300,000 of the remaining tax delay fund balance for use by the ERISAs for continuation of the literacy coaches for the 2025 school year. The Regional Education Service Agency boards are meeting on March 19 and will provide the board details on the intended use of funds for decision-making purposes during the April 2024 Utah State Board of Education meeting. And with your permission, I would speak to that motion as well.
Go ahead.
So in kind of an awkward form, I would speak against this motion. We debated this before. We were assured that they would have a plan if the legislature didn't move. We were assured that they had a plan B. And I just think getting into funding employees outside of our agency is just not a good move. And I would offer, honestly, as a longtime constituent of rural America, that some of our best educators in the state teach in rural schools. And so I really support rural education, but this is a slippery slope and a train wreck that I just don't think is the proper role of government. And I think if we want our local people to rise, we need to not engage in behaviors such as this. So that would be my speaking. I know others disagree with me, and I'm happy to hear the conversation.
Vice Chair Davis.
Thank you. I have an amendment.
Yes.
I'd like to add to the sentence at the end, and will provide the board details on the intended use of these funds for decision-making purposes and long-term funding solutions. Thank you.
Thank you. Board Member Straight.
Thank you for that motion, Board Member Davis. That was exactly what I was thinking when I talked earlier on the wrong one. And so, yeah, I absolutely support that amendment.
I have no objection, Chair.
All right, so that's a friendly amendment. Okay, so we are voting on that the Finance Committee recommends that the board approve allocating $300,000 of the remaining tax delay fund balance for use by the regional education service agencies for continuation of literacy coaches for fiscal year 2025. The Regional Education Service Agency boards are meeting on March 19th and will provide the board details of the intended use of these funds for decision-making purposes and long-term funding solutions during the April 2024 Utah State Board of Education meeting. Seeing no other comments, board members, please vote. Okay, that passes 4-1 with board member Bogus voting no. All right, so moving on. This is a little, I'm jumping around just a tiny bit here. The person who had requested to speak in public comment is on, and I feel bad that she's had to wait for so long. So we're going to bring in, I don't know if it's Ann or Ann Massey, who wanted to speak to our Finance Committee today for public comment. Are you on? Oh, yep, she is. Annie Massey's on. So we will give you 2 minutes.
I am wondering if Miss Massey knows we cannot hear her.
Well,
Oh, there she is.
I'm trying to start my video and it's not starting. It says you cannot start your video because the host has disabled it. So if you're fine with voice, I'm fine with, oh, there she goes. So I'll start my video. There we go. Thank you for your time. My name is Annie Massey. I'm a parent and I have 3 eligible school-age children. We live in Davis School District. I wanted to provide comment to item 2.8.1 on your agenda regarding the statewide effort to store our personal property in a digital cloud and with access. The foundation that I'd like to redirect the board with is found in Utah Code 53E9304, which states a student owns a student's personally identifiable student data, and in 53E9305, which states, get back to it, the collection, use, and sharing of student data has both benefits and risks. Parents and students should learn about these benefits and risks and make choices regarding student data. My question is, so if we own the data and we know that there are risks and we know that we're supposed to make choices regarding those risks, my question is, where are those choices? Where are the choices which further the interest of parents to respect and protect our liberty, interests, and parental authority and rights to be immune from participation in the wholesale digitization and storage of our personal property in a statewide digital cloud store? I resolve that the USBE, through general control, create policy and rules that create those choices that further parental interests, honors the mission and vision of Utah's public education, and protects constitutional privacy rights, privileges, and a process where citizens are granted their immunity from participation in the statewide student achievement backpack. Those three actions should include notifying parents, providing them the opportunity to provide no consent to digital storage, and then lastly, that include whether or not that storage has to do with personally identifiable information or de-identified data. So thank you so much for taking my time today. Thanks for your consideration.
Thank you very much. We appreciate that. And you're welcome to stay on. We will be discussing, well, we won't be discussing, but we will be receiving a presentation later on in the meeting about USIMS if you are interested in that. Okay, members, we are now on item 2.5, which is a discussion item, measuring the results of appropriations for specific programs. And I'll turn the time over to Deputy Superintendent Jones and Chief of Staff Sarah Young.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is an ongoing discussion related to measuring the results of the appropriations for specific programs. So if you'll recognize Chief of Staff Young, we talked to the board members about this, have requested this discussion continue. So if you recognize Chief of Staff Young, she can carry it further.
Yes, go ahead, Chief of Staff Young.
Thank you. So this request builds upon a previous conversation held by the Finance Committee. So the conversation really is touching on how our performance measures that are mandated by legislation could present an opportunity for members of the board, including Finance Committee, to be able to create further levels of detail and analysis and measurement related to each of the individual programs at the Utah State Board of Education. So you'll see that we have in backup kind of an overview of the conversation, both that has happened so far and kind of what we think is possible moving forward. So I'm just going to touch on a couple of those key items in backup. In terms of key questions to address, the questions that are in that document were gathered from a previous finance meeting discussion. So we're really looking at, from the board's perspective, how effectively are we tracking the allocation and utilization of funding, looking at establishing a connection between those allocations and measurable outcomes, being able to evaluate the internal budget and presenting a process by which Finance Committee and the greater board could engage in that, looking at monitoring the efficiency and effectiveness of expenditures, aligning those outcomes to student success, taking a look at mechanisms for aligning some of our more large scale outcomes to, intermediary measures and inputs. And then always being thoughtful about the fact that as we develop out these solutions, we're really not trying to design something that from a research standpoint is going to give you a direct correlation to causation, but does still present an opportunity for the board to look at how individual funding items may or may not be contributing to outcomes within the greater educational system in alignment with the goals of the board. So with that, the process we had previously discussed was kind of that we would potentially develop a proof of concept logic model, and that proof of concept would be applied to topic areas or program funding areas as identified by this finance committee. And that's really why we're here today, is to ask for your input related to, gathering a set of maybe 3 to 5 program areas where we could test out this proof of concept in terms of that measurement logic model system. We would then bring that draft for those programs back to you in the May Finance Committee meeting to give you an opportunity to tell us as staff whether or not that model is meeting your needs and how we can improve upon it to be able to execute this vision. With that guidance, we would then have an opportunity to apply it more broadly across the agency to additional funding streams. So if you go to the next and kind of last page, you'll see that we do have a few potential programs for the proof of concept for this committee to consider. To be clear, we're really looking for your guidance on which 3 to 5 programs you'd like to see us take action on. These were selected because they are programs that were already identified by our partners at the legislature through discussions at the public education appropriations meetings that we thought may be an opportunity for kind of a kickoff or a place to start. But with that, we would be interested to receive direction from you as finance committee members on which programs you'd like us to kind of test out this approach on.
Okay, so committee members, as you can see, this is not a broad range of topics, but we are frequently called upon to back up the programs and the requests that we are making with the legislature. So that is why this list came up, is we've had a lot of discussion about them lately. It is, if there's other things that you would like to add, that's fine, but this is just to help us create the model for going forward, for us to look more deeply into the finance of education in Utah. Any comments or thoughts about this?
Chair?
Yes, go ahead.
I may have a hand up, but I apologize.
You do. I was on the wrong screen.
No, it's probably me. I left my laptop sitting here trying to fumble with my phone. So thank you. I just want to say thanks to Chief Staff Young for helping develop what we've been talking about for quite a while into some very specific opportunities to move it forward. And I'll just say also that as we develop the logic model, I've talked to a few different local board members who are very interested in kind of how we're doing this. And so there's some questions to be answered about how exactly do you connect funding to outcomes? What are the intermediate? I couldn't say it better than Chief of Staff Young said it, but some of this, I guess I just want to point out, is a little bit of a development, but I think it's a step forward and one that some of our LEAs may choose to learn from as they, do a similar, process with their own funding. So thank you to Chief of Staff Young. I'll hold my thoughts. I think she came up with these. It's a great selection because it is partly intended to help the legislature kind of understand what we're doing internally as we're asking for money. So I'll hold my thoughts on specifics, but I think this is a great set of options.
Thank you. And I would say, to add to your what, it has also a why, why we are doing this, that we can come up with that information there. I'm not seeing any other hands. Chief of Staff Young, I don't want to put you on the spot. As just strictly for a model purpose, not for importance, not for, basic objectives of the entity, but just for creating this model. Are there any on here that you would recommend? It's just like, yep, this one would fit really well and would help us approach this topic.
So if I had to highlight two that I think would definitely be areas of interest. The first one is to and from pupil transportation services. I really like that one as a potential proof of concept, mainly because it comes more so from our operations side of the house and lens. And I think it's important that we have diversity in the proof of concept phase, because what might work really well for something that directly ties into student learning and academics, we may need to have, some modifications and a different approach for more so the operations side of things. So I would just highly encourage the to and from pupil transportation services as a great option. I think the other one that I would just highlight is the competency-based education initiative. So that one in particular, we've been asked pretty much year after year by the legislature to be able to, speak more about that program in a legislative PEA style setting. And I think that this could be an opportunity to look at that. It also does align with one of the 4 goals in the board's strategic plan. And so I think it creates an opportunity there. Those would be the 2 I'd highlight. But again, I'll be honest, I'm very flexible. You let me know what would be most valuable to you as finance committee members to see, and then I can work with the appropriate staff to bring you back some examples.
Great. And I'm comfortable with 2. I'm just going to give some, my input into this right now. I am one of 5 people, so the rest of you jump in. I prefer at this point to have 2, because we may need to adjust, and I don't want to have gone to the extra work of doing 3 models when, let's get it somewhat narrowed in with 2 of them. And I had one of the ones that I had looked at. Well, the one that I thought I would definitely want to pursue was pupil transportation, because that touches every corner of this state. And, kindergarten through 12th grade and even beyond. So I'm wholeheartedly in favor of that, and appreciate your input for the competency-based education initiatives. Committee members, other suggestions or comments or opinions? Vice Chair Davis. Muted.
I can support those 2. I think any 2 would be fine. I was actually waiting for Chair Moss to weigh in, because I think this is kind of an outgrowth of something that he had requested earlier on in our committee, of looking at different programs and, kind of ROI a little bit. Correct me if I'm wrong, Chair Moss. So, I'd be interested in your opinion, but I just want to point out the irony that all of these minus BTS, if I understand correctly, are legislative requirements. So, then we have to put them into place. We have to do all the work to get them up and running. And then we have to go back and prove sometimes to them about the value of what they asked us to do. I mean, I remember sitting and listening 6 years ago when legislature forced us to fully jump into competency-based education. And I can say the same about other of these things. And all of these have produced really some amazing and great opportunities, and I think improvements for education and for students. I think I would point out a little bit of the irony there, but I can support those 2.
Great. Chair Moss.
Thanks. And I have been kind of working on this, the concept. I think there's 2 parts, though. I think one is that we're in a better position to advocate the legislature, because these are legislative requirements, there are also things that we really like, right? In some format. And I don't mean to speak broadly for all of us, but I mean, I think we also have a board interest in these. And so that leads to the second part of just kind of healthy questions about what is the ROI as we're working on these, what versions of it are producing results, what kind of results. So I catch Vice Chair Davis's point here. And I don't think this was a demand from the legislature. This was frankly something that I suggested in response to questions, but I think it's a healthy opportunity for us to always be evaluating how the money is affecting outcomes. And I think it will help at the legislature. I also like those too. I mean, I didn't want to, weigh in first because having sort of suggested this, I wanted to hear what other folks thought might be the best programs to kind of kick it off. And those two seem like a healthy selection to me. So I could support the competency and the transportation.
And just to clarify quickly, I totally agree. I didn't mean to imply that this deep dive is a requirement from the legislature. It's just that all of the things that we're going back trying to show how we're doing it and that it's good were initially requirements from the legislature.
Yeah, I got it. I hear you. And I do, if I could follow up, I don't think this is just to justify our existence. It's just to learn ourselves. And I think it does inform conversation with the legislature. So this is kind of my take on some feedback. I think it makes us more healthy internally and does strengthen us externally. And so anyway, thanks.
Great. Board Member Straight.
Yeah, I agree with all those comments. I think it provides an opportunity to build support for the initiatives and the things that have occurred. I thought of a couple others, not that I want to add them at this point. And I agree, we don't want to jump into all of them, and 2 is plenty, and I support the 2 that are out there. But I was thinking paid professional hours would be a good one to do. Also thought about letters. That might be a good, although I might be off track on that one because we're already getting lots of information and data that probably answers the questions that are here. So maybe that's not a good one, but anyway.
Thank you. Member Bogus.
Yes, ma'am. It seems as if we're speaking about this as if it's an action item, and
It's not. No.
Okay.
It's
All right.
We're just giving our ideas and then just some groundwork to help Chief of Staff and her group continue forward until May, so that we can give it some direction and some specifics.
Okay, so okay, I'm thinking, and I might reach out to Chief of Staff Young later. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. All right, Chief of Staff Young, does that help with what you need? Is there anything else from us at this point that you need?
So just to clarify, the direction is for us to move forward with developing examples or a proof of concept around competency-based education initiatives in the to and from pupil transportation services, and that those 2 will be brought back to the May meeting for the Finance Committee to review as draft and to be able to give input to help inform future applications. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Excellent.
Great. Chair Moss, did you have another comment?
I don't, sorry. Thank you.
No, that's
Okay.
fine. That's fine. All right. Okay, then it looks like we can proceed on to 2.6, which is our next action item. This is the Tooele County School District FY 2024 mid-year update finalization. And Assistant Superintendent Deborah Jacobson and School Finance Director Sam Uri will lead us with this action item.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes.
Yeah, I just want to give a little bit more background on this before we bring in Director Uri and Assistant Superintendent Jacobson.
Thank you.
we've tried to do our best to keep the board updated on the situation with Tooele County School District stemming from the October 1 counts and then the subsequent mid-year updates and related to the enrollment situation with the MyTech High contract that Tooele decided to sever that contract with them. What this is if you could go actually into the backups, I just want to point out what the motion was precisely that came out of EAC and why we need a recommendation from the Finance Committee. So if you'll go down to page 14, the bottom of page 14.
It's actually 16 on the PDF.
I'm sorry.
But it is page 14 of the page number.
16 on the PDF. Sorry, good catch, Sam. Yeah, so they added that and I'll read this, the legislature intends that the State Board of Education use up to $10 million one time in non-lapsing balances from the minimum school program, basic school program, to mitigate fiscal year 2024 monthly, month state funding allocation changes associated with the calculation of weighted pupil unit under statutory changes that went into effect or are in effect for this fiscal year, 53F-2-302 passed in House Bill 1. House Bill 1 is the base budget bill coming out of the session, so it was passed early in the session, which made it so that law could be amended or updated for the public education base budget amendments 2024 general session. So I just want to call attention of the committee to the terms or the words up to 10 million. Staff recommendation is that the Finance Committee recommend that the board approve all 10 million goes to them. But because of that language up to 10 million, this is why we feel it necessitates an action by the Finance Committee to approve the amount that, basically EAC set aside for that purpose. So subject to any questions about the background I just gave, can we now recognize Director Yuri, who's doing an outstanding job overseeing the MSP as a whole. So, and then this particular situation as well. Thank you, ma'am.
Great. Go ahead, Director Yuri. Thank you for being here.
Absolutely. Sam Yuri, School Finance Director. Deputy Jones has done an admirable job of covering the situation here. I really don't have anything to add unless there are questions or comments from board members.
Okay. At this point, board members, if you have questions, this would be the time to ask them. If not, we have a proposed motion for us to bring to the full board if you are so inclined. Well, then I'm going to bring forward the motion. The motion for us today is that the Finance Committee recommends that the board approve the Utah State Legislature's Executive Appropriations Committee action to provide $10 million to Tooele County School District. And I think we can go with Deputy Superintendent's background information and Director Yuri's on why this was the amount that was listed. Go ahead, Vice Chair Davis.
Yeah, I support this motion. I was just waiting because I feel like I've been talking way too much. So I'm trying to back off a bit, but I think that as I've kind of watched over the last several weeks, Tooele has been working with our folks, with the legislature, and the legislature, gave this opportunity for a reason. And I think I'm sure there's great discrepancy on who thinks what amounts are really what is hoped for or needed or wanted, but this will at least provide some cushion with this situation for students. And we did have a parent, I remember, who came and pretty much begged for that in our board meeting as well. So I think we can support the legislature in this way.
Okay. Seeing no other comments, board members, go ahead and please vote. And that does look like it passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay. Item 2.7 is also an action item. This is a review of the 2024 general session of the Utah Legislature funding outcomes and determination of the process for the 2025 general session. We're going to have a panel discussion, it looks like, with Deputy Superintendent Jones, Chief of Staff Young, Assistant Superintendent Jacobson, and Director of Strategic Initiatives, Todd Call, on that process. Go ahead, gentlemen and ladies.
Madam Chair, if it's okay, I'll start off first. I'll be really short. The staff are supportive always of the board and your processes for preparation and leading into, your submission to the governor's office, which is required by law by the Budgetary Procedures Act in October. And then subsequently, what you as the board determine are your priorities or our lines of effort for requesting funding from the legislature. So if anything, this is just an opportunity for us as staff to check in with you, see if there's lessons learned from the last session, what we could do better. You'll see a process very well mapped by Chief of Staff Young and Director Call. But what we would like to do is, as you recall yesterday in main board meeting, if you could click on FY25 Public Edge budget comparisons. This again is something that we did review with the board yesterday. We didn't spend a lot of time on this, but this, here's an opportunity here for the Finance Committee as well. So you saw this yesterday, and so did the whole board. We won't necessarily do what we did yesterday and walk through with the Finance Committee because I know we're pressed for time here, but we just want to make sure that everyone does see the outcomes. And we feel strongly that this is an excellent tool because if you start from the left and you go to the right, it really does document well the process of the requests of the USBE that are made. Then they go to the governor by law in October. Then when the session starts, the first 3 weeks or the PEA meetings that ultimately results in the PEA committee recommendations to the EAC. And then, as Sam pointed out yesterday, the columns, of EAC's actions or the final actions that were made that resulted in the new money for public education. Again, pointing out that House Bill 1 was the base budget that was set. So the EAC actions are new money that came to public education. So if you scroll down to the bottom, you can see, as Sam pointed out yesterday to the full board, how much money actually was appropriated, new money was actually appropriated to public education by the legislature by way of the process. And this is the higher, level overview of that. So if we can go back out of this, then the reallocations comparisons, we didn't do this yesterday with the board, but I feel this is important to put in front of the Finance Committee as well. So if you'll recognize Director Yuri and Assistant Superintendent Jacobson, just to offer some additional insight on the reallocations, as there were several or quite a few this year based or due to revenue pressures. That's a term I use, revenue pressures. It's not too, but it's true. I mean, there were definitely some revenue pressures this year. So if you'll recognize Director or Assistant Superintendent Jacobson first, see if she has anything to talk about specifically on reallocations, and then Director Yuri, Madam Chair, I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Yes. Yes. Assistant Superintendent Jacobson, we would love to hear your thoughts and input, and then followed by Director Yuri.
If it's okay, we can go ahead and pass it to Director Yuri.
You bet.
Yeah, you bet. Sam Uri, School Finance Director. Um, you know, some of these are balance reductions. So, you know, carryover balances from prior fiscal years that the legislature has recalled. But we have discussed as we've gone throughout this process some of those bigger programs that were either eliminated through a reallocation or reduced. So on line 19 is the base funding growth for the teacher and student success program was removed. That was $15 million. Early literacy, as we've discussed at length, is 14.5 million was removed. The elementary school counselor program on line 21 was removed. It's important to note on the pupil transportation, that's not actually having a net effect of reducing pupil transportation. It's a fee restructuring from driver education that's been done there. But we also have intergenerational poverty interventions that was reduced. Title I schools paraeducators program. And then back up to, sorry, it's line 6, was the gang prevention and intervention ongoing reduction as well. Happy to answer any further questions. We didn't want to take time to review all 50 of these. Again, some of them are more balance reductions and things, but I just wanted to review that with you and let you know that a large part of these were done in order to fund the online 12, the students at risk WPU add-on weighting increase, which costs $27.9 million. And so a lot of that reallocating was done to fund that increase. Happy to take questions or
This looks like a pretty glum group right now. We got we one more time got to see the results of
we know maybe it's not the most exciting thing, but we like to keep track of it and make sure that everybody knows
it's not the exciting part, it's the reality of the economy part that's one more time raising its ugly head.
But did want to highlight MSP Administrator Del Frost and his work to prepare this, and appreciate our MSP team being very on top of things. So,
hey, am I missing any hands here? No. Go ahead, Vice Chair Davis.
I didn't want to take time in the full board yesterday, and I know we generally mention staff, but I just have to say that our finance folks have worked tirelessly this whole legislative session. And I know one day I happened to go up just to watch, I think it was a PEA meeting. Nobody was in the room, but there's Scott Jones sitting there waiting for the meeting to start. You know, I mean, they're like the first one's up there. They're working behind the scenes. They're meeting with Ben Leishman, our fiscal analyst. They're doing so much extra and probably haven't slept much. I hope they can go home for a long spring nap. But just want all of them to know how much we appreciate them and their efforts.
Go ahead, Chair Moss.
Hey, I'll echo that and then just make one other brief comment. I think at some point we might be turning to, tweak the approach. I think one thing that I felt the need to do is to have meetings over the summer, probably July, more formal meetings. As chair, I've usually reached out to the PEA chairs and a couple folks on EAC to try to get a sense. The answer usually is we don't know. Revenue numbers aren't here. They won't be here for months. We're still midstream of our process, but there are some things this year in terms of consolidation into the at-risk formula that combined kind of a question that's been percolating, programmatically, philosophically into a budget crunch. And, I think highlighted the need to maybe just have an earlier discussion, even if we don't know much over the summer, and take that from a sporadic to a formal sit down with the right folks. And I think members of this committee, certainly leadership, could probably do that. It could be both an after action discussion from last session and then looking forward, just so we're prepared, and we're going to take our positions of what we think is best for kids, but we got to fit it into that reality. So one thing I've thought that I could improve on is that, and I would definitely want to include any members of this committee or board in those discussions.
I think that would be very helpful because you're right. We don't know what the revenues are going to be, but I remember very, very clearly, I think it was in June last year when we heard from our finance and operations people with economic projections going forward, and they were pretty right on. And so I'm sure that we could get more of that information as well from the state and see if we all are matching up. And so I think that's a great idea. At this point, I think we want to talk a little bit about process, and that's, you did a nice segue into that, Chair Moss, with the process of the summer meetings and the helpfulness, because we did stave off some legislation, I think, because of those. But I think that it would be helpful for our finance and operations team to be discussing, when do we start? And maybe we could just add an extra month in the year, because I know we're at May. I think we started last year in May, which means you guys started in April, and we're at March the 8th right now. So I don't know that we can add any more time, but I'm guessing that you're going to say, let's get started sooner than later. Yes, Dr. Curie.
If I can just go back and further clarify on the gang prevention and intervention program on line 6, the ongoing piece, just about 2.4 million was removed, but it was added back one time for fiscal 25 by EAC. So it will still exist for fiscal 25.
Great. Deputy Jones?
Yeah, yes, ma'am. So I think this is a good segue to, at your direction, Chief of Staff Young, to, for the visual on the process. Again, we're just, checking in with boards, with the finance committee. Our job is to support you in the processes that you want to see happen, in preparation for 2025 general session. So if you could recognize her and she can bring that up, it's really a great visual. So
hey, go ahead.
Great, thank you. Cami, is it okay if I share my screen? I'm gonna go for it. Okay.
yeah, you should be able to. So, yeah.
Okay. Okay, here we go. So thank you for this opportunity. So as Deputy Jones mentioned, we just like to review with you what the previous action steps have been related to setting you up as a board to be able to make decisions about board priorities for future year legislative funding items. And as has been mentioned by several individuals, that comes sooner than you think. And so we actually would begin the process with you if we follow last year's timeline in April. And we do start right here in Finance Committee, where you as representatives of the greater board actually kind of get the first bite at the apple, if you will. And you as committee members start to populate a list of potential topic areas that you may see as needing additional legislative funding for the purposes of the next, so 2025 general legislative session. The generation of ideas begins here in Finance Committee in April, and then we move to May. In May, those ideas that are generated in April go before the full board, which is then their opportunity to provide additional ideas and feedback related to which of those you would like to see formally developed into a full legislative funding proposal request document. The template for that document was also included in the backup, and you can see that a lot of questions we try and answer are specific to what is the need, who will be impacted, is this request scalable, does it need ongoing or one-time funding, does it have a research base, and kind of giving you an outline of what it could look like. In addition to the full board conversation, 2 other items may happen in May. The first one being the Finance Committee can also continue the conversation around additional ideas that they may have heard from the community since the April conversation. And then the full board does have the opportunity to ask your staff at USBE to create what's kind of been known as the table of funding ideas. And those are things that staff may have heard from their greater community in the work we do with superintendents, directors, and other individuals across the education spectrum. Once we have that, we move into June, and June is really where we look for direction from the full board to be able to say to staff, these are the specific topics we would like to see developed into those full funding proposals. This can also include acting on some of those staff ideas, but the board then directs us as staff to complete that template for each of the individual ideas that are being requested. We use the month of July to really complete that process, and we bring all of those back to Finance Committee in August to be able to, flesh out any clarifications. So a lot of times as staff, we like to generate different and various options for the board to consider. For example, you may have identified a specific need or concern related to additional hours for educator professional time. And we can bring you back, here's what it looks like if we were to fund it at this level versus this level versus this level. And it gives you as a board an opportunity to provide that direction to staff, saying this is the level that we're comfortable with and we think addresses the needs and we'd like to ask the legislature for. In addition to that, the board may consider then having as an August study session this particular item to be able to give the full board that same opportunity to be able to give input to finalize these funding requests. That's important to be completed by August because September is where then you as the board go through all of those requests and make selections on those funding proposals that you want to give your board support to. And that's where we generate the board supported list. At the conclusion of the September board meeting, all of the board members receive a survey with those board supported funding requests, and you have an opportunity to identify your priorities that then ultimately goes into the October board meeting, where the board will make final decisions about what are their top priorities for the legislative session. And then we as your staff communicate those to the governor's office in alignment with the Budgetary Procedures Act. So what I've provided as an overview has been our process last year, and this is just our opportunity to discuss it with finance in case there's changes you'd like to see or additional action items that would help you reach that October date for submission in alignment with the governor's expectations in a different way or with additional supports. So with that overview, I'll turn it back over to the chair in case there's any questions or additional guidance you'd like to provide us as staff.
Thank you. Looks like we've got a question or comment from Chair Moss.
I'm sorry, phone fumbling. That was a mistake. One question though I do have is we had a little bit of uncertainty, I think, about the progress of safety funding. And one thing we might just look at is helping us understand what remains from last year's funding that may or may not carry forward. I think some of us had an understanding that funding on the prior bill was carried forward, and then there were questions about why additional funding wasn't requested. Just as a process item, we might want to think about that as well. Just kind of what's still out there and what's gone away.
Yeah, Madam Chair, Scott, we can do that. Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, I think that's important. I've written down safety April because I know, in listening in to some legislators meetings that they're looking at this as a long-term project. So I'm sure that they've got something new coming up for this upcoming year, and I know our board's very interested in safety. All right, if there's no other questions, there is a motion on this item. If we have someone that would like to bring that forward, and Cami, if you would put that motion.
I'll do that
Thank you. Go ahead.
once it comes up.
Yep.
Finance Committee members propose to the Utah State Board of Education the creation of funding requests to facilitate the preparation and presentation of budget proposals by Utah State Board of Education staff. These proposals will be presented to the full board starting in the August 2024 board meeting.
Okay, would you like to speak to that motion?
No, I'll
Any
pass.
questions from board members? Not seeing any. The motion before the board is that the Finance Committee members propose to the Utah State Board of Education the creation of funding requests to facilitate the preparation and presentation of budget proposals by the Utah State Board of Education staff. These proposals will be presented to the full board starting in the August 2024 board meeting. Go ahead and please vote.
Ma'am, I have a question. I'm sorry. I tried to get to the thing.
Okay, go ahead. Let's hold off on the vote then and
So as this is read and presented, it's just open-ended.
yes.
And I struggle voting for something that I don't really know what I'm voting for. We're just saying, hey, go ahead.
No, we're just saying that this is the process that we will start this process of creating funding requests that will go to the board, and we will present those in the August full board meeting.
But what are we presenting?
The funding requests.
Well, I understand that, but what funding requests? I can't vote for something when I don't know what I'm voting for.
We're only voting on process,
Voting
not
on the
on
process.
any content.
Right. We will bring forward those funding requests. And then starting in August, the full board will bring forward those funding requests, or their funding requests. But yeah, right now we're just saying that funding requests will be the mechanism by which we set our request for funding. And we'll start it in April.
Okay.
All right. Go ahead and please vote. Okay, and I am seeing 5 green check marks, so that means that passes unanimously. Let's now go to information item 2.8, the recognition of progress, achievements, or improvements. And Deputy Superintendent Jones will lead us through these items.
So ma'am, I don't, unless Cami tells me otherwise, we don't, this is an agenda item that we do use and will use in the future to recognize accomplishments, achievements by either staff or processes or programs within the agency. I don't necessarily have anything except as an update. There was interest on the part of committee members to be made aware of continuing recognition by GFOA of our LEAs, specifically, their recognition of their budget processes and how well they do managing and controlling public money. We also have some statistics that from our USBE IT section that if you will recognize Director Felt, he can go through those real quickly with you. with the committee. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, so Director Yuri and Felt, if you would like to address those quickly.
Sam, you're up, I think.
Okay. Yeah, I've confirmed with with John Palmer on our staff, who's excellent with LEA financial reporting. This is in regards to the fiscal year 23, and we've confirmed with both the government finance Officers Association and the Association of School Business Officials that these lists are up to date. So those districts being recognized for excellence in financial reporting are Alpine, Beaver, Canyons, Davis, Emory, Granite, Jordan, Provo, and Salt Lake City by the GFOA, and by the Association of School Business Officials. That's Alpine, Beaver, Canyons, Emory, Granite, Salt Lake, and Washington school districts. So we give them kudos for their financial reporting.
Wonderful. That's great news. Thank you so much. Okay, and then Director Felt.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Just real quick, I just want to recognize the amazing staff that I get to work with every day. Cami, if you could just go down one slide. There we go. Just take a quick minute to, so last year we completed or took in 18,000 tickets. So everything we do in IT is recorded in a ticket so we can track trends and issues as they come in. The majority of those tickets were not broken things. They were requests for additional services, changes to systems, things like that. So just wanted to recognize my staff and tell them what a wonderful job they did last year.
Yeah, that is a lot. Great. Thank you. All right. So moving on, we have another information item, 2.9, request for data and information. Do any of you have requests for data and information or follow-up from Superintendent Jones?
Madam Chair, there's no follow-up. As far as I know, we've completed all the follow-up actions from previous requests for data and information. So to your point, if there's anything new from any of the committee members, we'll be glad to take those.
Okay, not seeing any. We will move on to item 2.10, information item again. It's the review of the Utah Legislature 2024 General Session Compensation Bill.
And Madam Chair, this is just, if I may, Madam Chair.
Yes.
Yeah, this is just an information item. In the past, we've had committee members or board members even ask for, the compensation bill to stand out separately. If you could open it up, Cami, and I'll just do the summary of it. So as it specifically relates to USBE staff, the bill, just scroll down a little bit. Yeah, like line 15, that's good. USBE employees are intended to receive a 3% labor market increase. And then there's an additional 2% for us for a discretionary increase. Now, what that means is that all of our employees are technically eligible for 5%. This will be subject to management review of the available funding for our staff based on that 3% labor market increase and 2% discretionary increase for institutions like ours. So the bill is quite extensive, but I just wanted to make sure that to honor the requests or previous questions about how compensation is determined, it's determined by way of this bill through the legislative appropriations that occur as a result of this bill. The bill numbering is different, obviously, each year, but for the most part, we call this the compensation bill, and then go with whatever is provided to our staff within this bill. There's some other effects like tier 2 retirement plans, funding for an up to $26 pay period match for qualifying state employees, et cetera, et cetera. But I just wanted to make sure that the key information takeaway was the 3% labor market increase and 2% discretionary increase for USBE employees specifically. Subject to any questions related to this item, ma'am.
Oh, that's great. And I don't see any questions either. One point I'm just going to go back with really quickly. I just wanted to remind committee members that if they have thoughts about funding going forward, there is a copy of the 2024 funding request in the informational sheet that is used to kind of guide your funding request in the backup. Are there major, and this is for you, either Chief of Staff Young or Deputy Superintendent Jones, are there updates or changes to the 2025 request for funding paperwork?
No, ma'am, not that I'm aware of. You mean the form that we use for the request?
Yeah, it's got the purpose statement, the nature of the request, et cetera. Yeah.
Right. Not that I'm aware of, but we can check in with Chief of Staff Young to see if she has any.
You are correct. We have, Deputy Jones, we have not made any modifications to that form from the version we used last year. So it's the same.
Okay. So again, that is in the backup for 2.7. So if you want to look that over. Okay, well, let's take one final motion then.
Ma'am, if I may. So there was the PMR agenda item for the deeper dive on USIMS.
Yes.
So in the interest of time, we can defer that because the PMR for Utah grants was going to be next month. So, your direction, we can defer both of those deeper dives, but just would like to call attention to the fact that we do provide an update on both the USIMS project and the Utah grant system for your review and for the public's review. But yeah, since we're at the end here, we can defer until next month to do the deeper dive on both of those at your direction.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. We will do that next month in April, deeper dive on USIMS and grants. Okay, any final motion?
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you. Let's just do a voice vote. All in favor? Aye.
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 Okay, we are excused. We'll be back at 12:30. Talk to y'all then.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank
See
you.
you all. Take care.